Welcome to Taxed and Confused, the podcast where tax administration meets real talk. We are your hosts, Lizzie and Lisa, two tax nerds on a mission to decode the rules, demystify the system, and maybe even make you laugh along the way. From tax returns to objections and everything in between, we're diving into the world where the burden of proof is on you, not the ATO. That's right, this isn't criminal law. In tax, you're guilty until proven compliant. But just a quick heads up, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It's not tax advice, and it's definitely not a substitute for professional guidance tailored to your situation. So brace for bureaucracy and join us as we explore the weird, the wonky, and the wildly important world of tax admin. Because when it comes to tax, we're all a little taxed and confused. So, Lisa, in today's episode, we're going to touch on some of the broad stakeholders relevant to the tax profession. So we're going to be playing a little bit of Stakeholder Snap, looking at the jigsaw puzzle that is the Australian tax system. I'm going to give you a bit of a game here to play. I'm going to say a stakeholder's name, and you have 10 seconds to say the first three words or phrases that come to mind, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. Are you ready?
Well, I don't know. Have I got a buzzer? Pressure's
Sorry,
on.
The pressure is on. Let's start with our first one. Hopefully nice and easy. The Australian Taxation Office.
Necessary, bureaucratic, collecting of money.
Very good.
Is that all right? Yeah.
That's a good start as our first
Is that all right?
one off it. So why necessary?
Oh, tax is what we pay for a civilized society. So we do have to have someone collecting our taxes. Lizzie, from someone who is based in Ballarat, Eureka Stockade, I think we know all about no tax without representation. So I think it is definitely necessary. We do need to have anybody, and I'd much prefer to have the ATO than the IRS.
Yeah, wow. Why is that the case? What would make you prefer the ATO to the IRS?
Just the mechanism of the IRS and all the bad stories that I hear about some of my clients who are dual citizens. Because remember, the US has got a citizen-based approach to taxation. So if you're born there, you've always got to put in a tax return. And just the clunkiness of their system and the it's quite interesting. All my clients that are dual are very scared of the IRS, and they think the ATO is just so lovely. It's so interesting that. So
wow,
definitely so. Definitely.
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who probably have a bit more negative to say about the ATO, but I think we'll take that as a win for the ATO on that fronting. And it's also, I guess, flipping just back to the previous episode about the self-assessment system and how the ATO, the commissioner, accepts a tax return submitted and the contents therein a little bit differently to the IRS too, in the sense that there's not a person viewing all the details of your tax return as an individual taxpayer here in Australia before that notice of assessment is issued. So that system looks a little bit different. But we'll move on. So I just realised with the first one, I didn't even look at the time. So I wasn't even really, I was giving you a feel of 10 seconds. So I won't keep it too strict.
That's all right. It's always good to just have a knee jerk. You gave me 3, so I'll just see how it goes.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, Board of Taxation.
Think tank, is that one word? Think tank, expert, policy.
That's nice. So expanding on that a little bit, perhaps for the listeners who are not familiar with the Board of Taxation, what makes it a think tank?
Oh, well, I throw it back to you, Lizzie. You've probably had more dealings with the BOT than what I have. But look, it's bringing the tax experts from everywhere together, isn't it? That's what it is, and that's the whole idea of it. And I know you've been called in for various committees and things like that. I haven't, so I look at it as being, if I don't know if Treasury's going to come up, but if we look at we need to make tax law, we need to look at policy. Let's get the experts in the room, and they're just going to give recommendations. So it can be made into law, or it may not be made into law. The things that make me think about parts of the tax law that we find confusing, annoying, lacking a bit of clarity. Look at things like Division 7A, which was a big Board of Tax issue, but like that went nowhere. Their reports go nowhere in that respect with the Div 7A, and that was released the same year as Julia Gillard's famous speech as well. So that's how long ago that was. And then the most recent ones have been, it's actually 2019 when you think about it, right? So we're talking about more than 6 years ago, which were the 2 residencies, right? And those sort of reports. So you're looking and going, yes, I think some part of our tax law needs fixing. Let's throw it to the Board of Tax and let them work out what you think is going to be the best policy way, administrative way, and fair, or equitable way of doing it. So that's how I look at the Board of Tax.
Yeah. And one of the recent reviews, as you noted, that I was engaged in, so my comments here aren't disclosing anything that's not public knowledge, but was on the digital assets and transactions in Australia. So looking essentially at the crypto economy and the taxation of that. And the recommendations that fell from that included things like the ATO, the guidance that they're providing, having a working group to kind of contemplate further and consult further with the profession on issues, but so you can kind of see that feeding back into the ATO, how they administer the tax system, and looking at that relationship with taxpayers who are impacted in that area. So it will be interesting to see what flows on from those reports. But yeah, certainly the big issue here is they can provide some policy recommendations like residency, Div 7A that are quite promising, but it still doesn't mean that they become law. They need to go through that standard process, and we're certainly seeing some delays and questions arising following on those reviews about, okay, what's happening now.
But of course, that doesn't mean that the reports from the Board of Tax aren't good, not appropriate or anything. Because remember, it then has to go into, it's still got to pass the political lens.
Yes,
with it all, and that's what's really important,
process.
Right?
Yeah,
and so it's really nice. Can I say the word enjoy? I don't know. Looking at what the Board of Tax is doing, it's like, oh, they understand. At least I'm not the only one. It's very much going, yeah, I sort of agree with that, but of course it still has to get implemented. That's just part of it. So I think of them as the tax think tank. That's the best way I can describe them going, yep, they're the smartest people in the room. Let's just see what they're going to come up with it all. So it looks like I passed those 3 words. I think you agreed with them.
No, that was good. And it is important to note that I think a lot of what they do recommend are supported. So notwithstanding the fact that we haven't seen reform for residency and Div 7A yet, what's actually recommended within that content, I think is actually well supported in the industry as well. So I think there is a desire for some of this policy recommendation to actually proceed ahead, but as to how long it takes is another question. It'll be interesting to see what does come through in the end in this space.
Lizzie, it comes down to what I said in the last podcast. The biggest tax reform we've had is probably GST. That's 25 years ago. Tax reform does take a long time in this country. So what happens is they just, the legislation's just little tidbits, and unfortunately what that does is just make it more taxed and confused, right? So if you don't pull it apart and build it from the ground up, you're sort of going, well, you've just got to fiddle around the edges. It is. It's all just tinkering. Look at superannuation's a brilliant case study if we wanted to look at that. There's a number of different models we can have for superannuation that's adapted all around the world. And so, it's for one purpose, and then it gets exploited, and then, you've got to start putting in all these safety nets, and it's all those safety nets then make it a lot harder, and that's why our tax system is 3 volumes if we actually still printed it out. It's as simple as that. And that's just our admin act. Sorry, that's just our assessment act. My apologies. Right, it's 3 volumes just our, and like, as most of the listeners will know, you know, we've even got two assessment acts, the 36 and you know, the 97. Why? Because on any big projects you run out of steam. That's how I describe it. And I also say all the bad stuff's still in the 36 act, but we won't go there either.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so it is really important to reflect on the roles. And yeah, policy reform does take time. And I know Paul Tilley has a really fascinating book out on tax policy and the reform process. And it highlights actually that you often need these big consultations, these big independent reviews that are really holistic, that are well termed, well kind of a good strong membership, so that, you know, when it comes to the right political moment, the right where there's good capital in the political side of things, that they can actually utilize that to target some more internal reviews, and really then put in that reform at the right time. That kind of good time needs to be found, because else it may fall through. It might not have the political support and may die a very slow death in that respect. So his examination of reforms in Australia highlight that there's those distinct kind of reform consultation that really build upon each other. So I think they're sitting there. There may be some time in the future that will be just right to bring out that kind of that background to really solidify some change in the tax system. But yeah, I think we've had calls for years and years for really contemplating, really upheaving the tax system we have now and reconceptualizing it. But there's a lot of talk, but not a huge amount of big kind of action here, but certainly tinkering around the edges.
Yeah, well, that's what happened with GST. Remember, it took 2 elections to get through, even, right? And Paul's book's really good at highlighting those sort of things. And the other time we seem to get tax reform, it's sort of like in reverse. So what we've got is we've got the Bendel case that's going to the High Court at the moment. And it's going to be very interesting to see what the actual outcome of that is, because regardless of what the decision is, and you can punt on what the High Court's going to decide on, there's going to have to be some reform of Div 7A as an outcome of Bendel, and it's going to be very interesting of how that's implemented, because those people that have got a history over the past 15 years or so of Div 7A, because it fits in quite nicely with the border tax discussion as well, you'll be able to see what needs to get fixed for that. So again, sometimes it's not, the appetite seems to be driven then by case law, because remember, case law is LAW law as well. We talk a lot about legislation, but case law becomes law as soon as the judge brings down its decision. So we'll see what happens from there, because if that goes the way that most professionals think, there's going to have to be some legislative changes. So then it might be to revisit what the border tax said from the Div 7A paper. So let's just see what happens. But again, that's what's triggering it. So I think for tax reform to change in this country, we have to have a number of different triggers. It's not just the border tax writing a policy paper saying, this is a good idea, implement it. Because as I said last podcast, you always have winners and losers, and politicians politicians' first job is to keep their job.
Yeah, and it's also the resources to enact a significant change can be quite significant. It you know, and the flow-on impacts within the greater system. It's quite a massive undertaking to kind of overhaul tax systems or parts of the tax system here. But
even look at, Lizzie, look at something as simple as the biggest promise from the last election, which is the 20% HEX reduction. I don't know why that's taking so long. Let's assume it's administrative. The ATO said, you know, it's backdated to the 1st of June. The legislation passed a little while ago, you know, a month or so ago, and they're saying, well, it'll be gradually implemented into everyone's loan accounts by the end of the year. I'm going, that's just taking 20% off the balance as of June, 1st of June. So imagine if it's even more complex, how much more work needs to be done. Single touch payroll, payday super, there's all these things that are very administrative, has no bearing whatsoever really on the assessment legislation, that takes a while to implement.
And just kind of stepping back a little bit, I just want to add a point to this in respect to, for example, the Bendel case. Obviously, we have an outcome at the time of recording this that is law, LAW, but at the moment, because it's still going through to the High Court, the ATO can, in accordance with the Administrative Act, still keep on with their perspective, their interpretation, apply that to taxpayers' situations to maintain essentially a level of playing field or a certainty in how they administer the system. But ultimately, at the moment, the law LAW is distinct and not in the same position the ATO is in the interpretation here. So we've got this weird period of time where the administration doesn't align to the law, but that's accepted because from the practicalities, the logistics, we don't necessarily want flip-flopping between how we treat things as well. So it's kind of a really difficult trade-off here as well, in the sense that, you know, to some extent, the ATO, there's arguments that the ATO should be changing their position because the law as it stands now is one way, but recognizing, well, the appeal process is not completed. So, you know, administratively, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's where it's very hard for people that don't have a good understanding of all the tax system. And like, you know, I've said this many times, if you heard me say this, the more you know in tax, the more you don't know, and how it all interacts. Okay. And the good thing about the ATO is they will actually state their position. You might not like it. You might think, well, why have they done that? But they state their position and they're legally under their Admin Act, you know, what they're allowed to do, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we got sidetracked again.
Oh, no, this is great. So the next one is the Inspector General of Taxation and Taxation Ombudsman.
Oh, we talked a little bit about that last potty, didn't we? So the last episode. So, yeah, so Ruth Owen, who's absolutely out there, and she's been presenting many, many times to everyone. She's really trying to be active. So she's got, it's an interesting role that I got and the tax ombudsman has, because they're trying to hold the ATO accountable, but they haven't got a lot of authority, have they, Lizzie? Really? Okay. So the IGOT can do all these reports and suggestions and things like that with the ATO about the administration. They're purely the administration of the Act. You're not going to go to Ruth to say, someone hasn't paid me, I haven't paid someone. They're not doing fee disputes. No one will get into a fee dispute. That's just straight civil law. Okay. But what's happening is, well, we're not happy with the way the ATO has treated us administratively. That's really, and that's whether it's from a tax professional's point of view or from a taxpayer's point of view. So she's been looking at it. She's been doing a lot of different things. The previous two Inspector General of Tax, Karen Payne and Ali Narouzi, all been doing everything to try and keep the ATO to account and really upkeep their charter. So she can't force them to do anything. That's not within the remit of IGOT, but she can can I use coercive is an awful word. What's a better word for it? She can encourage them to do it. Okay. So she has got she's got more influence than you and I have, but she hasn't got the power over the top. And it's really coming down to that the ATO as a statutory government body isn't answerable really to anyone, you know, apart from, you know, Treasury ministers and things like that, right? They haven't really got another oversight board. And that's what is being recommended by IGOT in the past, and probably still is heavily recommended that way to do it. So it's, again, that's their role.
Yeah, and you've seen like in the recent report released on tax agent phone lines, recommendations being presented to the ATO, and the ATO being supportive and in agreement with a lot of those recommendations too. So while they can't force the ATO's hand, we're certainly seeing a little bit of proactive responses, and hopefully the system working as it's essentially designed at the moment to do, to kind of guide and ensure that the ATO does reflect and consider how they can change the way they operate to better the system overall for everyone involved.
Yeah, the ATO is trying to have a nice little branding. They're trying to say, that they put out surveys like, they're the most popular or the most user-friendly government department. And I'm going, well, that's an interesting benchmark to use it against. But it's quite funny because I follow a few of the government departments on Instagram. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics, if the listeners have not followed, if they're on Instagram, they follow the ABS. The ABS Instagram is hilarious. It's really funny, the stats that they give you, right? Because if you left a field, it satisfies my personality. Now the ATO is trying to do it, and I'm going, ABS is sort of like just out there gathering data for statistics purposes. The ATO, even though they're trying to do little funsy sort of Instagram ticky-tocky posts and things like that, I'm going, yeah, you're still collecting money, you're still, you can't be as friendly as the ABS. So it's interesting, that compare and contrast.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, we'll move on. So what three words come to mind, or could be phrases, come to mind for treasury?
Treasury. Oh, that's a hard one, Lizzie. What do we say for treasury?
Budgets?
Yeah, probably that's the biggest one. I'm just trying to think about, because it depends on the time in the cycle what it is. So directed by politicians probably is one, which means budgets. And can I use the word quasi-independent? Maybe that's the right word to use, or quasi-bipartisan.
Did you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, so Treasury should not be either Team Red or Team Blue. Okay, that's what I'm sort of saying. They are public servants, but, it's sort of like, you see a lot of things, like especially around election time, where the Treasury modelling happens, and And I don't think anyone goes through and looks at the report that Treasury's released. Or if they haven't released it, you can do an EOI, FOI, and have a look at it. And then what happens is, and I think this is where I'm sort of saying, quasi bipartisan. What happens is they'll do a report, and then of course their boss, whatever colour of politics they are, is going to cherry pick the information out of it. So that's what I mean. It makes it look like Treasury is partisan instead of bipartisan. So they try and do the right thing, but they can't control the messaging. If they get directed by the Treasury to say, hey, do a report on this, that's where it is. I mean, think about a 5% deposit for housing, that sort of thing. Is that going to increase the price of housing? Well, economists outside of Treasury give you one opinion, and then they say, but Treasury modelling has said that, but you're never sure whether the report's been cherry picked. Okay. And again, with Treasury, they draft legislation or get help draft legislation that then gets tabled into Parliament and things like that as well. But you're absolutely right. Probably the biggest thing people are aware of is they do the budget. But they do the budget under direction of the Treasurer. And that's where I sort of go quasi-bipartisan, because it's very hard for them to be totally independent if they're getting the direction of what their scope is by the Treasurer. So that one's, to me, this is quite controversial because, not only am I a tax nerd, I'm a political nerd as well, because they're the ones that can control what happens with tax. So you've got to get a flavour of the fundamental policies of the politicians and either the coalition or Labor to try and work out, well, what do you think their view would be on this?
Yeah. So you need to understand the context.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of where I'm coming to. And that's why I found that one hard, because you don't want to because they are another public service body. It's as simple as that. But I feel like if you're not familiar with their role, you may see Treasury working for Chalmers, and then, Treasury working for Morrison, or Treasury working for Keating, or whoever you want to say is the treasurer of the day. It makes you feel like they're working for them, but they're not. They are independent. Like the staff don't change just because the government changes colour.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way to kind of wrap that one up. So the next one I give you is Parliament.
Parliament. I prefer old Parliament House than new Parliament House, because we went there, didn't we?
Yeah,
when we were at a conference. We actually did both go there, and we decided that it was, even though we enjoyed it, we did went and saw the Constitution, didn't we? So we know it's there. Yeah. So Parliament. Okay, Parliament. We have a Westminster system of government. So, you want 3 words, don't you? Parliament. Combative. I like combative first, because we have a Westminster system of government. I think that's first. Can I just say makes the laws? That's a word.
Yeah, that's what I would have imagined.
Yeah, makes the laws. I'm happy to do that. Makes the laws. And can I say popularity over good policy?
That's a bit controversial. What's
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's where it is. Now, combative, and this is where I get quite disenchanted would be the best word, I think, with our whole political system, because it ends up being combative, and it's not a nil-sum game, Lizzie. This is where I look at it. It's like our whole political system is Westminster. You look at it, and I think both sides are split by 2 sword lengths, if I recall correctly. So it's set up to be combative, but it shouldn't be, right? Good policy should be bipartisan, right? We have to fix big problems. We need consensus. And I feel like the way our 3-year cycle, I'm not a big fan of, because I don't think it gives them enough time to do anything meaningful. Because it's sort of like a year to settle in, a year to do your job, a year to work out if you're going to keep your job. And also the way that we don't have a fixed term. With America, remember, we've got 4 years and we've got fixed term. Now, I'm not saying the American system's brilliant at all, as we well know, right? But I'm just saying the idea that you can game the system by working out when you're going to go to the election, I think is always putting the control into the incumbents area.
Yeah.
So this is where I think sometimes it's combat for combat's sake. And I feel like the current political environment, the current parliament, because they're all full of politicians, that's how it works, that it is very much trying to score brownie points and clickbait than actually deal with the actual policy outcome.
Yeah, that's where I was going to kind of lead the questioning here, is particularly the role of the media, particularly having everything so instant at our fingertips compared to previously where you'd be waiting for print newspaper to come out. What impact do you think that has on the system here and policy development? Does it make it harder for policy to be meaningful?
Absolutely. I think, and as I said it in the last episode as well, every politician wants to keep their job. Okay, I'm in an electorate where the incumbent lost her seat, and she's now very much adamant that she wants to try and win it back. It's sort of like that sort of thing. It's very much that way. Even we look at various announcements and things like that that's happened. It seems to be that everything that comes out of an MP's mouth is talking about how they're going to keep their seat or move to the next election. And it even came up with Albanese's discussion with Trump in the White House. He said, we ought to use this in my next election campaign. And I'm going, we've just voted. You've got at least 2 years to do your job, Prime Minister. And that's what I picked up. Even though there was other controversy in that meeting, I picked up going, no, Prime Minister, please, do the rare earths, do whatever, do AUKUS, whatever you need to do. If you're worrying about how you're going to get elected next with a 93 seats in the reps, it's just the way that it is. So I think that it's really important that, with the news cycle, and let's face it, journalists get paid, well, really, they get only paid two ways, Lizzie. Let's get back to economics here. They get paid by advertisers or they get paid by paywall. But let's just say no one buys a newspaper anymore. I remember when I teach in class, like you do as well, when you talk about mastheads or something like that, they go, do you remember what a newspaper is? Because no one buys them now, right? So that sort of thing. So I find that there is a lot, and anyone can publish as well. So all of that adds to, is there really good investigative analytical journalism happening? Or is it just legislation by press release? And the media drinks the Kool-Aid, just rehashes the press release without going into more detail. Even look at the more recent superannuation announcement where the government backed down on their previous 296 tax, so taxing people with high super balances. That was put in with the lower income super contribution. So it was already muddied in there. Like someone said to me, oh, they've released something on the 296 tax. And I read, this is all about the low income super. And it was just at the last bottom that they then backflipped on the original drafted legislation that was submitted to Parliament and got dumped after the last Parliament. So again, this is where I get a little bit disappointed. So it's really important. The thing that I always do when anyone says something is going, what makes them an authority? Okay, I always do that with the media, and I look at what is their bias. Okay, with the blow up in, try not to be political, but, the Rudd questioning came from a Sky News journalist, which you mean like going, well, did his bosses tell him to ask that question because ex-Prime Minister Rudd and ex-Prime Minister Turnbull's talking about an inquiry into the Murdoch media? So I always frame it in, okay, where did that question come from and what anyone's saying, right? So it's just, this is me being as, bipartisan as possible, but I always question where something is coming from. Okay, and where it needs to be. And I think that's very important.
I think that's something that comes through a lot stronger these days in understanding the source. The verification of content is becoming so much more front of mind, which is probably a good thing, but it comes with a lot of fake news, or what is described as fake news, or a lot of drama around it and questions. So we've all got to be a bit critical in how we perceive and we interpret, and how that influences our thinking. But we'll keep moving along. Our next one off the list is the Office of Parliamentary Counsel.
The Office of Parliamentary Counsel.
Well, three words come to mind.
We don't actually hear much about this, do we? So
it's a little bit of an unknown one.
It's a bit of an unknown one. So what are they meant to do?
They're meant to write the law. They write the law.
Well, they are, aren't they? So it's sort of like, well, but do they? That's why I'm saying, what do they? This is what I was being a bit flippant. I don't actually know what they do. Like, I know what they're meant to do, but if you're asking me three words,
and that's probably a really common response, because there's a lot of people because they're not really obvious to people. So the Treasury will filter in that instruction from government, and they will be tasked with actually writing up the law. So drafting the bill, drafting that information, working with the teams at the direction of the particular government. So as soon as there's a change of government, they will be rehashing their prioritization of tasks, but they're literally they're the ones that are actually working on that government legislation. So they're actually the writers. They are drafting the words that we then critique as part of our the consultation process when it gets presented to Parliament and whatnot. So yeah, one
But I
that's just not
assume that,
familiar. Yeah,
and that's why I sort of said I don't know, because do they actually do it? And that's
mm.
what my question is, or do they
Mm.
outsource it? And that's
No, they
why
actually do it. They
they do
actually
they
are the
do actually
team
do
that
it.
do it. Yep,
Yeah,
they're the
that's
ones.
was that was why my question, because I hear a lot of consultants go, "Oh yeah, I helped with this bit of legislation." So
Yeah.
that's why I wasn't sure whether they actually did it.
Yeah, no. And so some bills might take a short amount of time, others a longer one to develop. But yeah, they're the ones that are actually doing obviously those central bills. Well, we'll move on with that one to the Administrative Review Tribunal and the courts.
Administrative Review Tribunal and the courts. So the ART, it got a nice little rebranding.
Mm.
Bit like the Bureau of Meteorology side. It just got a little bit of rebranding. I just thought I'd throw that one in. I know it's contemporary, Lizzie, but I had to throw that one in because it happened on a day when there was a lot of wind in Melbourne. So we did actually have to go and see it. So the ART. So this is administrative. Okay. So what we're talking about, 3 words: administrative. I would say extremely knowledgeable.
Mm.
All right. I think they're extremely knowledgeable and cheap. There we go. There's my 3 words for that one.
There you go. So on the cheap side, that's so the accessibility for a taxpayer to take their appeal from the ATO process of objection, etc. It's relatively low cost to then pursue the issue with the ART. To then take it on to the courts becomes a little bit different, though, becomes a lot more costly.
Correct. And it's administrative. So we're looking at it saying it's not going into it as much as what the court system would do, but it gives you the first level of security. A lot of things. So what do we see in the ART, Lizzie? We see a lot of individual taxpayers, they've denied my deductions, I'll take it to the ART. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to take it for $10, but you might take it for $10,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's not no cost. There is a cost.
No,
so
but
it's got to have some kind of
yeah,
feasibility to
you
it.
probably need someone representing you, but you don't need someone that's very, very expensive in a very, very delightful, expensive wig. So yeah, and it's that sort of thing. But what I very much enjoy from a tax nerd point of view, reading the ART decisions. Now they just got branded from the AAT. That's why I made the joke, but the tax side. So this is the ART is just not for tax. It's for all administrative cases. But there was a little bit, I think there was a little nepotism going on with the other areas, but our tax was really good. And what I'm always impressed with, as I said, from a tax nerd point of view, looking at those cases, is the officers. I think that's the right title. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lizzie. The officers that review those cases and hear those cases, they're all very, very, very learned in tax. Very, very impressed with their level of knowledge is exceptional, I believe, because we know them. We know that they've written papers, they've come from academia, they've come from, big law firms or anything like that. We've seen what they've done and we know their knowledge. So I always look at that as going, oh, this is a really good analysis of this particular part of the law that they're looking at an administrative decision on. And that's why I like them. So even though they don't hold as much, what's the word that I want? Precedence, thank you. Much precedence as higher level court cases, because it's administrative, not judicial. It still gives us a very good idea of, if we're going to manage the risk for our clients, this position is reasonably arguable, is the way that I look at it.
Yeah. No, really good, really good. All right, we'll keep on moving along. What about the Tax Practitioners Board? What are the 3 words that come to mind with that one?
Friendly. Love. No. You're right. No. Necessary, friendly, and I think willing to help. Yeah. Or maybe no, go back. I'll go trust.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Necessary is trust. Yeah. So I think, that's good. Yeah.
Why have you centered on trust?
Well, that's their role. Okay.
Mm.
So the tax practitioners board, so we'll just go backtrack. So they are independent.
Mm-hmm.
They are independent from the ATO, is what I'm saying. They administer us tax agents. That's why I have to be very nice when I say something. Anyway, no, it's totally biased. It's self-interested all the way. No. And what they're doing, so it's actually the trust in the tax system and the trust in us as tax professionals. And I'll say tax agents because tax professionals also include lawyers, and lawyers don't have to be registered with the tax practitioners board. They're over on the legal side of things. So we're talking about us accountants do tax returns, interact with the tax system. They are our police officers to make sure we do the right thing. And that's where I believe it's a trust relationship. So the purpose of the TPB is to make sure we are trustworthy in administrating the tax system for our clients. That's my interpretation, Lizzie, for it all.
Yep. And again, going to a personal, a public service announcement is that if we're engaging with a tax agent, they need to be registered with the tax practitioners board, and that can be checked through the register on their website. So it is always important that if we're utilising the services of someone who is saying that they're a tax agent, that they are actually registered with the tax practitioners board. So moving on, we've only got a couple left on my list. The next one is tax clinics.
Tax clinics. Okay. Tax clinics are run out of a few universities. I don't know how many tax clinics are there? Lizzie, do you know how many? I want to say 13. Maybe there's more.
Well, that's a really good question. I think they have expanded more. So every 3 years that they're reviewed and added to.
Yeah.
So I'd have to check the numbers on that. Yep.
Yeah, I help out with the Melbourne Uni one. So I'm there. It was one of the very first ones. I think your tax clinic is pretty big as well. I think yours was the very first, or not?
Yes, it was.
So, was the very first.
Yeah. So Annette Morgan did seed funding to pilot it, and then it became a national program. So yeah, that was I think back in 2017.
So I think
been
Melbourne
getting
Uni,
stronger and stronger.
So Melbourne Unis is the next one. So I think we've both had some exposure to tax clinics.
Yep.
They run under different models, but really what we're talking about here is twofold. They help vulnerable taxpayers. So anyone can go to a tax clinic for free to get any sort of advice. It's not a tax lodgement service. It's a tax help service. So think about it. I always think about it as like a legal aid centre. This is like tax aid. That's how I do it. The second thing, which I think is absolutely equally wonderful, is that it's providing vocational education to the students. It gives them experience in dealing with real tax matters. Real tax matters when they're still within learning about tax. So that interaction between the client and their tax. And if they're vulnerable taxpayers, which a lot of them are, this is where a lot of the vulnerability framework and the work on coercive control and domestic violence and sexually transmitted debts come from one of the tax clinics. You're dealing with a lot of people that are just going, I'm getting hounded. I need to get my tax affairs in place. Otherwise, Centrelink will cut off my funding, that sort of thing. So in terms of that's the role that the tax clinics play, but it also gives the students of these clinics an exposure of how to deal with clients like that, especially when a lot of 20-something-year-olds text and do those sort of things. It gives them some interaction with some real people out there. And, these are people that they may would never have come across in their normal life. So it's an extremely valuable service. There was a little bit of a pushback, Lizzie, I think, when they first started thinking that tax agents saying the tax clinics are going to do people out of to do tax agents out of clients. And I'm going, that's not the client base, guys. That is really not the client
Yeah,
base.
they don't have the
as is.
capacity to seek out a tax agent, perhaps financially or through their vulnerabilities, that they can't access the normal or the more traditional services being provided. So it's really servicing that cohort that didn't have access and weren't in positions necessarily to even call up the ATO to have their issues sorted, or didn't know how, or were just fundamentally limited in and needed that support. So yeah, that really sums up at night nicely. So the last one on my list are professional bodies. What 3 words come to mind there?
I have to be really nice with this one as well, Lizzie. I'm a member of a few. I think, can I say branding? I'll go branding. I'll go legislation/accreditation sort of thing. It's sort of, and that comes into skills and knowledge sort of thing is where I'm coming from with that one. And advocacy. There we go. We'll throw that one in at the end.
Yeah, I was going to say community.
Okay. All right. So, we can have a general chat about that one too, though, but that's all right. Yeah.
No, I think those are really kind of relevant points. That it does, you are connecting to a particular brand, a particular cohort of practitioners. You're seeking support in building your skills, maintaining your skills, and it is a check of quality assurance that you are capable and able. There are checks and balances that you're meeting to continue offering the services. So a little bit overlap here to the Tax Practitioners Board. They both have codes of conduct that you need to comply with that can be quite comparable.
It's a bit of a Venn diagram sometimes with both of the roles, because remember as well, just for the listeners, is that you can be an accountant without being a tax agent. So just because you've got post nominal from one of the accounting bodies does not mean you are allowed to lodge tax returns. It's an additional credential.
Yes.
And you can be a tax agent without being a member of any of the accounting bodies as well. So there's both ways that it can work. But when I talked about branding, it's adding another layer of, am I with my post nominals, with my tax agent? It's all about building trust with my clients and saying, I am accountable to a higher authority. And that's where it is that I get it's professional judgment, conflict of interest, ethics, all those sort of things fit within that framework. And the TPB looks after it for tax agents, the professional bodies looks after it for accountants. So for someone like me, I get the double whammy. I get covered by both, right? Yeah. And that's where I look at it. And again, it doesn't provide all our continual professional development or anything like that. We can cherry pick that from where we like, but there's that quality aspect to it all, right? And that's the registration accreditation aspect. It's ongoing. And that's where I was coming to from that
lifelong
aspect.
Learning, and really contemplating all the way through about ensuring that you are constantly thinking about upskilling, constantly thinking about your capabilities and how that fits in with the broader tax profession, I think is really, really important. So on that note, are there any stakeholders that we may have missed in our conversation? Because I think we've hit the end of my listing that was the focus of today. Is there anything else you'd want to flag?
I think the only other big stakeholder in this system is the taxpayer, Lizzie.
True.
Right, I think the biggest stakeholder in all of this is the taxpayer. And even if you don't want to be a tax professional, even if you don't, even you're going to study tax just to be an accountant because you got to tick it off or whatever, we all pay it. I walk into my first lecture with my cup of coffee because I love my coffee, and I said, have I paid tax today? And I have, So I think it's really important that no matter where you are in the world, you're paying tax. So it's a good idea to understand the system that you operate in. It comes hand in hand with your financial literacy. So don't underestimate the role of the taxpayer in all of this.
Yeah, that's it. And looking around at the services and the access to facilities that we have that are generally born out of the tax that we pay, that the government can provide a variety of different services. The support mechanisms in place in society are funded largely through the taxes that each taxpayer contributes.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think just everyone needs to know where they fit in the grand cycle of things. And so I think even though we're talking about being tax nerds, I mean, we pay tax too, Lizzie. So we need to know how the system works, right? And I still begrudge it when I do some things and I go, no. And I go, well, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I pay my tax with a smile.
Because
I have to, yeah. Exactly.
And that's a beautiful note to finish this episode on, paying your tax with a smile. All right.
And your tax agent bill. No.
Totally. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Taxed and Confused, where the rules are rigid, the paperwork is endless, and the burden of proof is all yours. If you enjoyed today's deep dive into tax admin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's just as confused as we are. And remember, this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It's not tax advice, and we're not your tax agents. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay compliant, and stay just a little bit taxed and confused.